events in the movie that this wasn't the case. Because of his death, Lee was unable to give payment a vessel. However, that didn't stop her from trying, and she waited until her daughter Annie had a son named Peter. At the time, they weren't really on speaking terms, and thus she was unable to use him in a ritual to summon the spirit. Years later, Annie and Lee repaired their relationship, and Annie had a daughter named Charlie. Charlie was of course named after Charles, and from what we know, the cult then set their eyes on her. There's lip service paid to Lee telling Annie that she wanted a boy, and this is exemplified in one of the customized mats that Lee made for the child, which has her name as Charles instead of Charlie. The cult successfully managed to put the spirit of Payman into the girl. However, Payman desired a male body, and thus he did not bestow upon them the riches that they seeked. Though we see the events unfold from the perspective of the family, the film centers around the cult transferring the spirit of Payman from Charlie into Peter, all whilst carrying out the rituals that enable this possession to occur. Now from the off, there's a ton of foreshadowing, returning characters, and just things in general that don't pay off until the end. Annie makes miniatures, and we initially start off with a slow pan across one, which then becomes the real world. There are a ton of theories that exist around the symbolism of this, but personally, I believe this almost dollhouse-like aesthetic shows that the characters don't really have any agency or control over the events that play out. They are like dolls, unable to move and divert from what's happening, and this is given weight by the story of Hercules, which pops up in one of the many classroom scenes. We learn that the character was a pawn in a hopeless machine and that he didn't really have any control over his fate. Dolls appear throughout the film, and they too have a lot of meaning to them. The miniatures depict key moments in Annie's life, and she uses them as a sort of therapy to understand the situation. However, they could show that the cult were controlling it all. Charlie too makes her own dolls, and later in the film in Joan's apartment, we do see that she has them too. This layout of the candles and dolls does slightly resemble the ending shot for the film, and it perhaps suggests that everything is being controlled by the cult from the shadows. We first meet Charlie sleeping in a treehouse, even though it's freezing, and this is where Payman would later return in the movie in order to complete his rebirth. It's a great way to recontextualize our introduction to the character in both the opening and ending, and it adds a lot of subtext to the events that are going on. At the funeral, we see a creepy man smiling, and he later returns in the film, standing in a doorway. We also see a strange symbol that is worn by Annie and her mother, and this brings a lot of implications with it. The symbol appears throughout the movie at several key points, and it belongs to Payman. One of the most important instances in which it appears is on the post which Charlie gets decapitated on. It's painted in blood in the attic of the property. It appears in one of the cult members' homes against the wall, on the cover of one of Lee's books, and it actually ties back to Payman himself. In one of the depictions of the character that we see in the literature on him, we can see that there are 3 heads hanging from his camel. These 3 heads would later be toned down and repurposed to make the symbol, and the 3 heads of course represent the 3 beheadings that we see throughout the film. These are required to summon Payman, and they happen with Lee's corpse, Charlie, and Annie at the end of the movie. Now what the funeral does is that it tells us that the cult have always had their eyes on the family, and there's a really creepy moment that you might have missed when first watching the film. Before the family return home from the funeral, we can hear footsteps moving about the house. I'll play the clip of this twice now with the volume increased, but listen closely for the sound of people walking around the house before the family enter. Did you hear that? Well, we do learn later in the movie that there had been cult members which had drawn a triangle in the house and transported Lee's body to the attic, so it is likely that at least one of these instances happened here. Annie seems relieved by the passing of her mother, but she's haunted by an apparition of her in the darkness, and from here she attends a grief meeting. It's here that she meets Joan, who we learn was second in command to Lee, and throughout the film we discover that she's now the cult leader. There are several clues that something is off with her throughout the movie, and at the meeting when the leader asks if anyone would like to speak, Joan immediately looks to Annie, perhaps subliminally forcing her to talk. Joan slowly sparks up a friendship with Annie, and they bond over their grief. Joan tells Annie that she lost her son and grandson, and they perform a seance in which she proves the latter's existence through the use of his favourite chalkboard. However, there's actually a clue that this is a lie, and when Annie bumps into her at a car park, we can see in the back of Joan's car that she's purchased a chalkboard set, which indicates that this was all a ruse. We also see at one point that there are letters and flyers piling through the letterbox of the home, and then a one for a seance is produced over the top of them. This was to call Annie to attend it, but after she didn't show up, Joan had to intervene. Payman's light draws characters to certain things, and throughout the film it appears at numerous times to lead them down a certain avenue. This is never more evident than when Annie is in her workshop. At the right hand side of the screen, we see the light appear, and then Annie seemingly knocks a paint pot over, which draws attention to Joan's number. However, if you slow the scene down and look very closely, you will see that the paint pot actually falls over on its own, and that Annie never actually touched it. This was the work of Payman. The light also appears in Charlie's room and leads her outside. We see footprints in the dirt and also a woman burning a fire. She's stopped by Annie, but it does show that the light guides people to certain places. Payman's light can be seen in the classroom before Peter sees a reflection of himself smiling, and it too can be seen coming through the rafters when he starts to choke. I'll talk about this smiling later and what it could symbolize, but for now we'll just focus on the light. There is later a fade in from a scene to the miniature which shows Charlie's death, and at points a bowl does look like the light, suggesting that Payman was complicit in the beheading. Those are the more subtle ones, but it is littered throughout the film. Speaking of beheadings, Charlie cuts off the head of a bird at one point, and we later see a drawing of it in which the beak looks similar to scissors. We also see a model of houses stacked on top of each other, which suggests the idea of homes and families built on those that came before, and how Lee's goal was always to connect herself to the demon in order to obtain the power that it would grant. Though we don't learn the ins and outs of all of the rituals that are needed to summon Payman, there are actually a lot of clues going on in the film that suggest the necessary steps that one must take. Firstly, there is the 3 beheadings that need to take place. On top of this, we learn in the Book of Payman that the target must be vulnerable and drugged with a special herb that will open them to possession. This is called the Dittany of Crete. We later see that Lee fed Charlie this as a baby in her bottle, and when Peter is smoking under the bleachers, it is likely that he too was drugged with it. We do see that his friend on the left hand side appears towards the end of the film bowing before Payman, so it is likely that it was put into his system here. When Annie is drinking tea at Joan, she pulls a herb out of her mouth in disgust, and this is the same one that allows the spirits to enter their lives. Payman marks his prey by making their arm point in a specific position, and we see him carry this out on Peter. This has ties to the illustration of him, in which we can see that his staff has a bent wrist and hand at the top. It too returns at the end of the movie and reminds us of that headbanging scene. After the death of Charlie, Annie starts to lose her grip, and she turns to Joan, who tells her how to conduct a seance. Annie performs this with her family, and it opens them up to Payman, who is able to tear them apart and take over Peter. The group slowly start to close in on them, and throughout the film we can see several of the cult members. There is of course the aforementioned one at the funeral, but when Peter is smoking outside of his window, we can also see the breath of someone standing there watching him. A woman can be seen waving to Charlie, who later appears in the attic, and as things ramp up for the climax, we can slightly make out in the darkness several figures standing around the house. When Annie fully loses it and is taken over, we can also see her hiding in the top corner of Peter's room. It's enough to give you nightmares, and it's a scene that I've pointed out time and time again to people because they haven't actually noticed it, with the attention mainly being focused on Peter and the lighting of the movie obscuring her. For the climax of the film, she stalks him throughout the house and hides in the corner of another room before making her play. Annie chases Peter, but he manages to make it to the attic, and she can be heard banging her head against the door. She somehow manages to get in after this and beheads herself, and if you were wondering how this was possible, there's actually a clue hidden in the darkness of the loft. That's because when Peter enters it, we can see cult members standing in the shadows, and they likely unlock the door and let her in. Peter, scared for his life, runs out of the attic, going headfirst through the window, and he dies upon hitting the ground. If you pay close attention, you can actually see the shadow of his soul leaving his body before Payman's light comes in and takes over. The ending theme itself has a mix of bells and trumpets, and in mythology, this is said to accompany Payman when he comes to Earth. He travels to the treehouse where Charlie slept at the beginning and finds that Lee and Annie's corpses have been reanimated and are now bowing to the statue of him with the bent wrist staff. Joan gives him his crown and explains to him what's going on, and she actually calls him Charlie instead of Peter, showing that this was always his original identity. The camera pans out to an almost model-like structure once more, showing that he has arrived. We then cut to credits. However, the creepy aesthetic isn't over yet, and we can see in the names that one letter turns red and then drops down to the next name, symbolizing the hereditary nature of passing something on through our genes. Now, as for the smile earlier in the movie, I do believe that there was a secret agenda by Payman to separate Peter from Annie. We see his reflection smirking in the classroom, even though we know that the character was not. After Charlie's death, the relationship between the two breaks down, and Annie complains that Peter won't admit that he's guilty, and that he always has a stupid face on his face. I don't think that's the exact line, but you know. Anyway, it is possible that this was Payman doing this in order to drive them apart, and he was forcing Peter to smile even though the character didn't want to. We also see Annie sleepwalking throughout the film and dreaming that she set Peter on fire. She also tries to pull his head off at one point, and this could be her subconsciously trying to save her son from being a vessel for the demon. There's a ton of things going on, and no matter how many times I watch the film, I always spot something new. I'm glad that I finally got around to covering this, and obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on the film and if there's anything I missed. Comment below and let me know, and if you enjoyed this video then please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you check out a breakdown of the insane details in Midsommar, which is going to be linked at the end. We go over the hidden faces, subliminal messages and more, so it's definitely worth checking out if you want something else to watch. If you want to support the channel from as little as 99 cents a month, then please click the join button below. We massively appreciate it, and as a thank you, you get access to content early. If you want to come chat to us after the show, either follow us at DefinitionYT or click the Discord link in the description below. Those are the best ways to keep up to date with heavy spoilers, so hopefully we see you over there very soon. This is a channel for people who are mad into movies, so if Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Definition, and this is the channel where we break down all the latest movies, new game releases, TV shows and comic books. With It Chapter 2 now out for release digitally in the US, it's time to revisit one of my old videos to bring it up to date with all of the Pennywise appearances across the two films. It's crazy the amount of times that the character pops up in the background of a scene, and hopefully this video will make you go back and rewatch the movies with a new appreciation for just how much work the creative team put into them. If you've already seen the first video I made and just want to skip to It Chapter 2, then I'll leave that time coded in the description, but I've also dropped in a couple of additions for the first movie too, if you want to stick around. There will be heavy spoilers here, so if you haven't had a chance to watch either of the films yet and don't want anything ruined, then I highly suggest that you turn off now. With that out of the way, I just want to give a huge thank you for clicking this video. Now let's get into our breakdown of every time that Pennywise was hidden away in the background of a scene. Okay, so the very first appearance of Pennywise actually comes within 5 minutes of It Chapter 1. This happens way before Georgie had his fateful run-in with the killer clown in the sewers, and it starts the movie off with one of the creepiest things that I've ever seen. As Georgie makes his way down into the basement, he passes several impressions of Pennywise, and even almost bumps into the character directly when making his way down the stairs to the bottom part of the house. It also looks like Pennywise may be a painter and decorator on the side, as in Georgie and Bill's house there are several small images of the character ingrained into the wallpaper. Anyway, just before Georgie goes down the steps into the basement, in a blink and you'll miss it moment that roughly takes place over about 2 frames, you may also notice his small shiny eyes watching the young boy at the top of the stairs as he descends the flight of steps. Whilst he also appears later in the scene hiding under the stairs, this is the first of many examples that shows that he's always one step behind his prey, constantly stalking them and waiting for the perfect moment to attack. Who knows how long he actually followed Georgie for during this scene, but it's enough to give you goosebumps as you realise that once Pennywise has its eyes on you, it's very difficult to get away. Up next is the library scene with Ben, in which there are several minor appearances by Pennywise before he makes his final play and tries to attack the character in the basement of the building. I guess the rule is, if there's a killer clown after you, just don't go down the stairs anywhere. Anyway, the first one comes in the form of the creepy librarian that slowly watches Ben as he reads about the history of Derry. Throughout the scene, the mysterious librarian creepily stares at him, smiling as he digs deeper into what exactly may be going on in the town. It's a really haunting scene, and there's something that I didn't even pick up on in my first couple of watches, though the more you focus on the background of the scene, the more you realise that Pennywise is slowly making his play. I noticed comments last time of people saying it was just a woman doing her job, but look at her expression, and also yeah, she's standing in the exact same position that the balloon appears in the next shot that leads Ben to go down into the basement, which cements for me that the character is indeed taking on her form. Another blink and you'll miss it moment that also happens in this scene is when Ben is flicking through the book, and in a small frame that flies by so fast you have to screenshot it in order to see it, you will see the children's Easter egg hunt that infamously ended in disaster. In the top corner of the photo when paused, you'll notice a blurry vision of Pennywise that shows he was the cause behind the massacre and has been in the town at several key points. As we know from it and Ben's research, Pennywise is often at the centre of many famous disasters in Derry, and this confirms that he was indeed behind the many deaths in the Easter egg hunt. Soon after this scene, Ben is caught by Henry Bowers and we see a balloon pop up in the back window of a car. During the attack he calls out for help, which goes completely unnoticed. This shows that Pennywise has a hold over the adults in Derry and is physically controlling them so that they will appear nonchalant to any trouble that the children in the area get into. This is why Beverly's father can't see the blood in the bathroom, and why in one of the film's many deleted scenes, Bill's father is unable to see that the basement is flooded after Bill's encounter with Georgie and Pennywise down there. It's also why no one ever really leaves Derry, and the fact that the losers do shows that they are highly driven people, which plays into why they all go on to have successful careers. Though the one in the car is wrong, no one ever really leaves Derry, and the fact that the losers do shows that they are highly driven people, which plays into why they all go on to have successful careers. Though the one in the car is rather obvious, it adds a nice amount of subtext to the city, and definitely lets you know that Pennywise has the ability to reach into pretty much every aspect of the town. The next one comes during the scene in which the Losers Club try and help Ben with his cuts. The characters are all leaning up against a wall with graffiti behind them, which seems innocuous enough, until, during the scene, Pennywise's face appears in the markings watching them. The face definitely isn't there earlier in the scene, so it's safe to say that this has been done with something else other than a spray can. It's an awesome little addition that once again cements just how able Pennywise is with hunting his prey. He can follow them wherever he wants to, and this makes him infinitely more terrifying. We see this wall once more in It Chapter 2 when Bill rides past it on his bike, and Pennywise is still ingrained in it, showing that the character is very hard to get rid of. Up next is a rather obvious one, but I thought I'd include it just in case you missed it. During the scene in which the Losers Club all admit that they're afraid of something, we can see a clown on the stage in the background staring at the group, and when Richie says that he hates clowns, the figure reaches out menacingly to him with a balloon, and from this point on just stares at him. Yep, that's Pennywise alright, and this scene is given more weight in It Chapter 2, as it's the same location that Pennywise uses to scare Richie. Beverly also has a doll in her home that looks similar to Pennywise, and the character also makes an appearance in the TV show that seems to be plastered across every television screen in Derry. Pennywise appears towards the end of the movie on the show, taunting Henry to kill his own father, but if you go back and watch the movie, you may notice that this show also appears in the rest of the film on almost every TV screen that we see. Firstly, Eddie's mother is sat watching it when the children go out, and later when Beverly sneaks past her father, he too's also got it on. If you listen to the voice on the TV very carefully, you can hear it encouraging kids to go down to the sewers, which as we know is a main hunting ground for Pennywise. This is basically just another way that it slowly seeps into the consciousness of the town, and why so many kids end up going to the sewers to play. You might also notice that sitting next to the presenter are the missing children from Derry, who all have severe wounds in their body that probably indicate the brutal way that Pennywise killed them. This show just exemplifies that Pennywise is psychically pushing it into the townspeople's minds, as we see Beverly sneak past it once, and then when she goes past it again, the TV is just playing static. Yikes. On the way to the old house on Neobolt Street, before they enter we can also see a bottle with Bob Gray on it, and this is a callback to Pennywise, who famously used the moniker. Bob Gray is a reference to the serial killer Albert Fish, who too used the pseudonym when carrying out his killings, which involved kidnapping and cannibalism. The final one for the first film comes in the house on Neobolt Street itself, in which Richie becomes trapped in a room full of dolls. Not only is there one that resembles the original It portrayed by Tim Curry in the 1990s miniseries, there's also one that looks like Pennywise on the right hand side. Both sides of the room show the history of Pennywise, and it showcases that the character was watching Richie far before he jumped out of the coffin to attack him. Anyway, that's all of the ones for It Chapter 1, So let's move on to the next film. The first one we see in It Chapter 2 is during the introductory logos, in which we can see the deadlights floating around the Warner Brothers and New Line logo, which lets us know that these will be major parts of the film. This is Pennywise's true form, and it's awesome that we kickstart the film with a nod towards the creature's real appearance. Another brilliant thing that It Chapter 2 does that the prior film didn't is that it ingrains the symbolism of Pennywise into several aspects of the town. The parade is littered with red balloons, and there's a huge mass of them that appear under the bridge after Adrian is attacked. This shot is then mirrored slightly later on when the girl leaves the bleachers, as many of the members of the crowd wear red hats, and due to their positioning they almost look like balloons arching down. A red balloon also pops up behind Adrian at the carnival before he's attacked, and the actor who plays Chris Unwin, who pretty much instigates the entire thing, is played by Katie Lundman. Now this is a callback to the first film, as Katie also played the part of Betty Ripsum, who was one of Pennywise's most famous victims. This recasting was done intentionally, as in Derry it is theorized that those who die horrible deaths at the hands of Pennywise don't get to go on to an afterlife. Instead, their doomed spirits remain in the town, being reincarnated into new people that then go on to lead hateful lives. Mike mentions that it's like an echo, bouncing back every 27 years. And for those who don't know, in the book, Chris Unwin was sentenced to prison after the attack, having his life ended in some ways around about the same time that Betty had hers. Anyway, this is not the only recasting either, as Eddie's wife is also played by the same actress that played his mother in the first film. This was put in place to show that Eddie did literally marry his mother in some ways, and there's also a big part in the book that jokes about how similar his wife and mother are. Other cameos include Stephen King and the director of the film, Andy Muschietti, who appears behind Eddie during his trip to the pharmacy. Anyway, back to Pennywise appearances, and in Beverly's home we see her run past a large painting of her and her husband Tom Rogan. Over Tom's shoulder you can see an almost shadowy form of Pennywise controlling him. Pennywise could have corrupted Tom over the decades, and this has led him to abusing Beverly similar to how her father did. It could also be a reference to the source material and 90s adaptation in which Pennywise controls Tom and gets him to kidnap Bill's wife and bring her to his lair as a hostage. Either way, it's a really creepy image that reminds us that you can't escape Derry no matter how much you try to get away or forget. When we are introduced to Henry Bowers, we can also see in his room images of Pennywise on the wall, most notably a red balloon which shows that he never really got his childhood out of his head. Now I did see a lot of comments on the last video of people saying that Pennywise walks behind the fish tank during the restaurant scene, but I'm sorry everyone, I've watched it about 5 times and still can't see it. Anyway, the next appearance is at the bleachers, and Pennywise pops up just before he makes his attack on the young girl. Similar to his move on Georgie in the first film, we can see it just before it makes its attack, sitting and hiding in the background as the girl chases the firefly. The next major one we see appears during Mike's vision of how to carry out the ritual of Chud. When viewing how it came to Derry, we can see a form of Pennywise standing behind Mike, mimicking his movements, and also in the scene we see the original form that it used to attack the Native Americans in the area, which was a giant bird and a huge beast. One of the forms for a split second looks like the original spider creature that is seen at the end of the 1990s miniseries, and in Mike's room there's actually a poster of Pennywise on it which is promoting the Derry Canal Days. There's no reason Mike would want to have this image up of the thing that scared him the most throughout his entire life, so I have a sneaking suspicion that Pennywise put it there himself. Now what's most important about this ritual of Chud scene is that it turns out in the film that this does not defeat Pennywise. The fact that we can see Pennywise controlling Mike at one point makes me think that he deliberately did this to trick the character into thinking that he had a way to destroy him. It's quite a smart move as it gets all of the losers club back together again, and had they not been scared of the character he would have likely defeated them. So this entire ritual of Chud scene has a double meaning to it. The next one is pretty obvious and was shown in the teaser trailer for the film. This is Bob Gray, who in the scene we discover was a victim and alter ego that Pennywise adopted at the start of the prior century in Derry. This callback to the bottle from the previous movie is pretty nice, and there's also some hints that Pennywise is in the room just before Beverly enters it, including the door which says Marsh before it changes to Kirsch, and when Beverly knocks, Bill Skarsgård's voice is the one that can be heard answering it. This shows that Pennywise probably made its play at the last second and jumped there, creating the illusion just before Beverly knocked. The old woman also pops her head around the corner several times and does a walk like when you get out of the shower without a towel. When Richie revisits the arcade we can see a torn poster behind him that has the words "it" ripped into it, and when the character goes outside he gets past a funeral program that not only has his face on the front but also Pennywise's on the back. It's another blink and you'll miss it moment that lasts about a frame, but it's a great little Easter egg that I hope some of you seen. When Ben revisits the school, we also get a hint that Pennywise is in fact using Beverly's form, as its shadow appears in front of the projector before there is seemingly a fake out and we see that it's just Bev. In hindsight, we know that this was indeed the character, popping up to unnerve him before quickly changing its form to try and get Ben to let his guard down, and even when we go back to the shadow after we see it's Bev, it still looks exactly like Pennywise does. I guess you should never go to summer school, or whenever this was that Ben attended, whilst also fighting the creature, making friends, and building an underground bunker. Yeah, some of these retcons don't work. Anyway, when Bill chases the boy that now lives in his old house at the fun fair in order to save him from the snatch of the killer clown, we can see several elements of the fun house that feature the 1990s miniseries Pennywise played by Tim Curry. They're not your typical punching bag either, as they almost knock Bill off his feet when banging into them, and this shows that Pennywise always packs a punch. Also, before Bill finally catches up to the kid, Pennywise walks behind him at several points and even appears right over his shoulder, menacingly looking at the character. It's pretty scary, and this scene definitely holds a lot more weight knowing that Pennywise was stalking him the entire time throughout the House of Mirrors. Yeah, I'm never going into a House of Mirrors again. And
they're fighting for their lives on a mission fraught with dread. Well, Cuphead and his pal Bugman, they like to roll the dice. By chance they came.
Não, prefiro a outra.
And begin! Now go! Here goes! You're up! Now go! Now go! Now go! It's on! Here goes! It's on!
Hã? Por que eu fiz isso, né? Nossa.
And begin!
Sim, saco. Farra na sucata.
This match will get red hot. Now go! This match will get red hot. You're up!
Porra, dura 2 dias esse laser.
Good day for a swell battle. Here goes. A brawl is surely brewing. Now go. This match will get red hot. Now go.
Ah, maldade. Tá.
Good day for a swell battle. You're up.
Oi, jogo? Não, tudo bem então. Não, tudo bem então. Eu tô nesse ritmo mesmo.
This match will get red hot. It's on.
Ah! Tá bom, jogo.
A great slam and then some.
Ah,
Now go. Here's a real high-class bout. And begin. Good day for a swell battle. Here goes.
Casa da Honey Bottoms. Belo nome. A Bela Reale.
This match will get red hot. Now go!
Oi, oi, oi. Não esqueci que pra baixo, pula pra baixo. Ai, coceira no nariz.
Here's a real high-class bout. You're up!
Porra, foi essa, Magman?
A brawl is surely brewing. It's on!
Por que eu tô fazendo isso? Tem pra ir pra cacete na próxima fase. Ah, eles tiraram aquele negócio. Que merda. Dava pra farmar muito. Muito negócio nessa parte. Deixava a luta fácil pra caralho. Nossa senhora. Nossa senhora, é muito chato enfrentar esse personagem. Triângulo. Não. Tá. Durante o parry eu tô melhorando. É, mãe, isso não é pra mim não. É, porque é o roteador que dá internet, pô, não é o provedor. Imagina. Mas se passa levar o roteador de vocês, você consegue na internet lá. Ah. É sério que chega na terceira
A brawl
fase.
is surely brewing. And begin!
Sério que ele tem duas pontas? Nossa senhora, vocês deveriam já estar usando esse roteador há 7 horas. 7 anos, quer dizer.
This match will get red hot.
É, só que o roteador de lá é uma merda. Nossa, ainda tem que enfrentar aquela bosta daquele trem. Meio. Esquerda. Porra, tinha um... Eu não sei se você tá ligado.
Well battled.
Naquele círculo, dava pra bugar muito o jogo. Spamava o botão de parry e pegava 5 a 6 cartas. De tanto que carregava. Pula na beira mesmo, Guilherme. Vai dar bom. É sério que eu fiz isso? Aparentemente é.
Good day for a well battled. You're up.
Eu tomei dano. Não vou falar nada não, viu? Eu tomei dano.
Good day for a well battled. Now go.
Ai, ai.
Here's a real high-class bout. You're up.
Matei, velho.
This match will get red hot. Now go.
Botão errado.
A great slam and then some. Now go!
Tem que pular já seria de cano
This
parry,
match
velho.
will
Isso é um
get
saco.
red hot. Here goes! This match will get red hot. Here goes!
Sem pânico, Guilherme. Você consegue, pô. Na boca. Travou!
A great slam and then some. And begin! A brawl is surely brewing. Here goes!
Por que que eu apertei o botão errado? Deixa eu ver quantas horas.
A great slam and then some. It's on. Cuphead and his pal Mugman, they like to roll. Here's a real high-class bout. And begin!
Ai, meu nariz. Tá bom, né, jogo? É que o Lober dá dano pra caralho. Abelia Royal. Não, pera aí.
A brawl is surely brewing.
Como é que é o nome da fase? Paula protagonista. Ribomba na ribalta. Paula tá. Paula tá.
A brawl is surely brewing. You're up.
Bora, protagonista. Já? That was fast. Yep. Ele sempre aparece quando ela tá prestes a morrer.
Good day for a swell battle. You're up.
É que merda do Mugman. Me atrapalhando. Esse aqui mesmo. Expresso Fantasma. Road Rage.
Good day for a throwback.
Yep.
And begin.
Sabia. Vai ser do outro lado. Yep. Full net idea.
A great slam and then some. Here goes.
Ter boné. Ter boné? Ter corrida. Ter corrida. Ter corrida. Você já tava morto. Por que eu tô me dando pra você? Esse jogo é muito bom. Vai ser esse, quer ver? Ai, fucking it. Se você não fala... A caveira caiu na manivela.
Here's a real high-class go. It's on.
Eu não.
Here's a real high-class go. Now go.
Sim, eu sei o que eu fiz. Sei lá, quer ver? Nossa, eu tô em cima dele! Olha a vida dele.
This match will get red hot. It's on!
Quem que me deu? Quer saber? Não vou tentar entender não. Só vou aceitar que eu tomei esse dano mesmo.
A great slam at this time. Now go!
Sem tempo, irmão. Fom.
This match will get red hot. And begin!
É, porque eu vi o negócio ali, pô. Eu tenho certeza que eu vi.
You're up.
Desperdício, mano. Foda-se.
Good day for a throw battle. Now.
Não gosto muito de usar essa porra desse negócio não, mas vamos lá.
A great slam and then some. You're up.
Eu posso mandar pra cima, não sabia. Boa, viu, jogo? Ele me pegou, viu? Né? Meu tempo tá acabando. Eu tenho mais 2 tentativas.
Here's a real high-class bout. And begin.
Demorou demais pra entrar na live.
Here's
Última
a real
tentativa.
high-class bout. Here goes.
Ah, beleza.
Well, Cuphead and his pal Bugman.
É isso. Vou nessa. Abraço.